Good morning. I'm a couple minutes late. I was trying to figure out my YouTube. Anyways, good morning. As you guys probably have seen, I am now referring to this as Menstrual Monday. I called it that, and A, nobody had any other suggestions, and B, it just kind of flows. So this is what I'm using. So happy Monday. Uh, like last week, I'm hopping on here. I'm talking about a topic, a question that I've been asked, something you guys are interested in, something that I feel needs to be cleared up with respect to women's health. So that is what we are diving into today. Today's question, I'm talking all about birth control. There's been a lot of questions since last week about just birth control in general. Some people have heavy periods while they're still on birth control. They tell me that their periods are light while they're on birth control. And so I just want to talk about in general birth control, how it, I'm going to put in quotations, helps your periods, and why you may or may not decide to continue with birth control. And so let's just start. If you have any questions about what I'm talking about, comment below. If you have any additional questions or topics, also comment below. I'm probably not going to talk about it today because, like I said, I want these to be under 20 minutes. So it's easily listened to, rewatched, and the topic is really clear for people who are watching the replay. Like my one last week, this will be on my IGTV. I am also going live on YouTube, so that will be available as well. So let's just get started. I am talking about birth control. So let's just start by talking about hormonal versus non-hormonal, because I have a lot of people who will reach out and they'll message me and they'll say, I'm not on birth control anymore. I'm on the IUD. And I just want to clarify that you are on hormonal birth control unless you are on like the copper IUD. But the majority of IUDs and birth control pills are hormonal. And so there's no difference really between going from a pill to an IUD other than the ease of use. So an IUD is inserted. It can be inserted for a number of years. You don't have to remember to take a pill, all of those sorts of things. But you are still using a hormonal birth control. So I just want to be clear about birth control includes IUDs, pill, ring, patch. The only non-hormonal birth controls are going to be the barrier type methods, condoms, diaphragms, that sort of thing, which are, and then you have like the less often used ones, the spermicide stuff, foams, loops, that sort of thing. But when we're talking about birth control, we're pretty much talking about hormonal across the board, unless you have like the copper IUD, which is the one non-hormonal kind of piece. So let's just kind of clear that up first of all. Second of all, I just want to say that I am not against birth control, but I do want women to be informed. Informed decisions are really, really important when we're deciding whether or not we want to go on birth control or whether or not we want our daughters to go on birth control. And so just understanding what the purpose is really kind of the first piece of the puzzle. So my question I always ask patients is, why are you or why did you go on birth control? Not because I'm being judgy about their choices, but the reason why you went on birth control gives me a lot of information. And so if you tell me I went on birth control for birth control, perfect. That is literally the purpose of birth control, is contraception. But if you told me you went on birth control for your acne, your heavy periods, your painful periods, to regulate your cycle, then that is something that you should have had a conversation surrounding informed consent. And so that is the reason why I ask my patients, why were you put on birth control? Because for me, I was put on birth control because of my acne. That doesn't sound like contraception. And what happens is when you're a young preteen or teen, if you're like 13, 14, 15, what'll happen is you have this acne, you have these heavy periods, you have these irregular periods, which, by the way, when you are 13 and you just get a period, having them not extremely regularly for the first little bit is actually normal. And so we really need to discern, A, what's normal, what's not, and why are we going on birth control? If you are putting your 15-year-old daughter on birth control because you are afraid that she's sexually active and she doesn't understand proper fertility awareness yet, then that's okay. But if you're putting your daughter on birth control because she has painful periods, heavy periods, irregular periods, she's in so much pain, she misses school, then we need a second opinion. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And so let's just talk about how hormonal birth control works. Now, hormonal birth control, the purpose of it, basically across the board. So you're going to have different, I always have people ask me, like, have you heard of this one? Have you heard of this one? And they all are pretty much the same in terms of their mechanism of action. Okay. So what hormonal birth control does is it pretty much stops your ovulation. Like, that's the purpose, right? We're stopping ovulation. Now, when you tell me that you have a lighter period with birth control, you can understand stopping ovulation is stopping the entire process. So if we go through everything really quickly, first half of your cycle, you have estrogen. Estrogen's building up the lining, okay? It's getting that follicle ready. It's getting that egg ready to release. Halfway through the cycle, we have the main event. We have ovulation. Ovulation is releasing that dominant follicle so it can go get fertilized. Like, that is the purpose. That follicle sits there and it becomes what's known as a corpus luteum. That corpus luteum is responsible for creating the progesterone in the second half of your cycle. And so we have estrogen, we have ovulation, we have progesterone. Without ovulation, we do not have that progesterone, okay? And that impacts, like, progesterone impacts the receptors for estrogen for the beginning of the cycle again. And so estrogen and progesterone work together. And so when we're being given progesterone and estrogen in a synthetic form during our cycle, A, it's synthetic, so our body's dealing with it a lot differently. But B, we're being given it at a dose that isn't creating those ebbs and flows that normally happens during a menstrual cycle. During a natural menstrual cycle, we have changes in where our hormones go so that we can have ovulation, right? When you're taking hormonal birth control, the idea is to stop that for contraception, right? If you're not ovulating, you can't get pregnant. But if you're doing this to lighten your periods, fix your acne, reduce the pain, it may do that, but understand that it is a symptom block. Because what happens is we turn off ovulation. When we turn off ovulation, our body's no longer responsible for making those hormonal changes. All right, and I just got a phone call from probably Service Canada or whoever calls saying that you're going to be arrested. So sorry that my live video paused. But basically, we're stopping that main event. And what happens is when we get off birth control, if you've been on it since you were 15 and you get off it at 30, now your body has not ovulated on its own for 15 years. And so really, when we get off of birth control, our body needs to relearn how to create that hormonal balance. And so this is what I fear when we put our young girls on birth control to kind of like slap a Band-Aid on their acne and move forward. I know for me, my personal experience, I was put on birth control at 13 years old. By the time I was 23, I hadn't even questioned anything. I knew I felt like crap every single month, but I hadn't really questioned, oh, should I be off of birth control? What should I be doing instead? Is there even an option? Because oftentimes I'll speak with women and they'll say, I've been put on birth control for my acne, but my doctor says if I come off, I'm going to get pregnant. And it's like, that's not how it works. The act of coming off of birth control does not make you get pregnant. So I think that we need a little bit more education in this gap here, because we are meant to believe, and we are really, it's kind of like a fear thing. And I've had it where I go to the gynecologist and he's like, well, we can put you on birth control. I'm like, well, that's not really what I'm looking for right now. He's like, oh, okay, so you're family planning. It's like, no, that's also not the option. So understanding, first of all, why we're on birth control. Second of all, what it's actually doing for us, because we could feel good. Like, some people will go on birth control and be like, my periods are lighter, my acne's gone, all of the things. But my question is, okay, so we are right now covering the symptoms. We are in symptom management mode. But is this your long-term plan? Are you going to be on birth control forever? Because if it's not your long-term plan, at some point, we're going to have to deal with this, right? And so at some point, if birth control is not something that you're planning on being on from age of 13 to age of, 55, or whenever you go through menopause, which you probably wouldn't really know, then what's the next move, right? What's the next plan? Because at some point, we're going to go off and your periods are either going to be regular or they're going to be crappy and you're going to have other symptoms we're going to have to deal with. And so here's a couple pieces to that. First of all, if you went on birth control, this is one of the reasons why I asked the question, why were you put on birth control? Because if you were put on birth control for a symptom, for a heavy period, for a painful period, for acne, then it's probably going to return when you come back or when you come off. And so a lot of people have this, well, will it impact my fertility? Honestly, we don't really know at this point. I can say from the research I've seen, the birth control pill does not significantly impact fertility. But what it does do is it covers up whatever was going on for the past 10 plus years. And then suddenly you come off of the pill and you can't get pregnant because you may have had undiagnosed PCOS 10 years ago that was really never dealt with. And so that's where I see a lot of the problems. And when I see a lot of my fertility patients, this is the problem that I'm seeing, is I'm seeing women maybe who had PCOS that was never properly diagnosed. And so they're not ovulating properly and they have a slew of other metabolic issues, but they were on birth control for 10 plus years, which birth control has been shown to increase your insulin, which insulin is the root cause in PCOS. And so that's a whole other issue. But once they come off, it's like, okay, now I want to get pregnant. Well, now they've not only had their ovulation turned off for how many years, but they weren't ovulating on their own as it was. So now we have these insulin issues, we have ovulation issues, and these women can't get pregnant because it wasn't properly diagnosed 10 years plus ago. And so looking at why you were on the birth control pill is going to be a bigger predictor of your maybe fertility success going forward. But even if you don't want to get pregnant, even if that's not the goal, ovulation is important for our general overall health. We need to be ovulating, like I said, to make that progesterone in the second half of the cycle. Progesterone plays roles in skin health, mental health, sleep. So we need to make sure that we are balancing our hormones regardless of fertility. Ovulation is not just important, like I said, for fertility. The period is known as our fifth vital sign. And so if you are on birth control, you do not have that fifth vital sign. It gives you an indicator every single month of what's going on. And so when you get your period, if it's heavy, if it's painful, if it's like really great, that can give you an indicator of how your body's been handling stress, how your diet's been, how your movement's been throughout this past month. And so it does give you a really big indicator and a really good window into what's going on with your body. And so there is an importance to having a period beyond getting pregnant. And then also, when you are on the birth control pill, some women will just be put on pill after pill after pill after pill. And then their doctor says, okay, well, time for menopause. You might as well come off because you can't get pregnant anymore. Well, guess what happens? When your sex hormones are made throughout the lifespan, your sex hormones are made by your ovaries. When that is finished, when you get close to perimenopause and menopause, guess who makes those hormones? Your adrenal glands. And so if we don't have that transition happen smoothly, you're going to have a lot of symptoms. And so a woman who has not made those sex hormones for how many years comes off of birth control, what's going to happen for menopause? Are you just going to have a tank in your hormones? Maybe, but it's really hard to say, right? And so I think that when it comes to birth control, having an informed decision or having an informed discussion with your medical provider, with your naturopathic doctor, if you have one, I speak with my patients all the time about this because they are not informed of maybe they're wanting birth control for their daughter or they're considering birth control for their daughter. And that's an okay consideration, but we really need to just take everything into account. Why are you choosing this? And is there an alternative? If your daughter is not sexually active and you are not worried about her getting pregnant at this point in time, at the age of 13, and she has acne and painful periods, well, it's time to seek a second opinion. And so that's really the point I want to get across. And like I said, going on birth control is not a bad thing, but I want to tell you, I did a presentation talking all about your period and all about hormones to a grade 9 health class. And do you want to know? 0% of these girls in grade 9 knew what a normal menstrual period looked like. So I think that if you are going to be on birth control at a young age, it is still important to understand a normal, hormonal, natural cycle and to understand what birth control is actually doing. Because I will speak to these women and they'll tell me, and I even have patients who I guess birth control is not working because they'll tell me, I have painful periods, I have heavy periods, I have acne, I have breast tenderness, and I'm on the pill. And so really, if the point you went on was to better your periods, it's not working, right? And so sometimes people say, oh, my periods are really light, or my periods are fine, and my acne is great, and or my skin is great, and all of the other things. We just need to understand that this is symptom management mode. And so there's nothing wrong with being in symptom management mode if that is where you know you are. If you think that you are fixing the problem by being on birth control, you aren't. And that is just kind of the facts. So understanding that, I think, is first and foremost. The other thing I want you to understand is that you do not have a period when you are on the pill. We need to be letting these girls have normal. I know. I know. And I understand parents being scared of pregnancy and teenage pregnancy and all the things. But guess what? Our sex education just needs to be better then. We just need to do better. We need to teach our girls better. And I just obviously get really heated about this topic. Because when I went into this high school, grade 9 girls did not know about their periods. Like, they didn't know what was normal. They didn't know what normal discharge was. And guess what? I would be willing to bet that most of these girls, if not all of them, are sexually active, not knowing normal discharge. So I think that that's really, really important that our girls understand that at a young age. We need to understand normal cycles. The last piece that I was going to talk about is when you are on birth control, you're not having a period. We just need to understand that when we're on birth control, you're not actually having a period. It is a withdrawal bleed. Like, that's what it is. We give you hormones. We take them away in the form of sugar pills once a month. Or some girls will ask me, or women will ask me, is it okay if I skip a pack? Is it okay? Like, when should I finish it? Can I just skip the sugar pills? Like, some people will have the NuvaRing and they're like, my doctor said I can just take it out and then put it back in instead of having that week without it. Yeah. Honestly, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you're having a withdrawal bleed. You're being given hormones. You're taking the hormones away. And so this is what will happen if you haven't had a period for, like, I don't know, 3 to 6 months. Your doctor will give you a progesterone prescription, say, take it for 10 days and then stop taking it. And that is to hopefully bring on a period. And some women, this doesn't work. In women who have PCOS and have severe metabolic issues, this usually doesn't work. But a lot of times, women who haven't had a period for a long time will take this prescription, will take it away, and then they'll have a period. And that's kind of that. In the fertility setting, in a fertility clinic, we give birth control for like 10 days to reset a cycle, right? That's what they do. And so it really doesn't matter if you're on birth control for 10 days or 10 weeks. It really doesn't matter, because what we're doing is we're creating a withdrawal bleed. What your body does after that is up to you. And so I always say, we can never predict what your period is going to be like when you come off of birth control. But looking at what your periods were like before birth control is a really good indicator. So for me, like I said, I went on birth control. I had acne. I had heavy periods. I had painful periods. Well, guess what happened when I came off of birth control? Acne, worse than it's ever been. I had fibroids. I had heavy periods. I had irregular cycles. Now, all of that has since been resolved. You know, I talk about my acne all the time. My acne is like a really fun part of me that just like sticks around. But everything else was able to be resolved over time, but it didn't happen overnight. It was a hard, long process that took me putting in work, diet, acupuncture, lifestyle, supplements, working with an ND to get through all of that. And it didn't involve birth control. So that's kind of that. And the 3 patterns I see before I kind of wrap up, the 3 patterns that I see when women come off of birth control. And this is really hard to predict. Like I said, look at why you went on birth control. Number 1, you come off of the pill, you have your withdrawal bleed. And the first 3 months, you just kind of have regular 28-day periods. So 28-day cycles, you're having a period every 28 days, and you're feeling really good. Everything's fine. And then after those 3 months, your cycles are like 30 days, and then they're 35 days, and then the next one's 40. And then you're like, okay, what's going on here? Do I have acne? Like, what else am I seeing? And this is where we start to see patterns, is after 3 months, we start to see these changes if they were going to happen. Second pattern that I see is you come off of the birth control and you're kind of like, where's my period? And we're just kind of waiting for your period to see what happens. Again, hard to predict. Third pattern is the one that like we all wish can happen, but you come off of your birth control, your periods come right away, they are regular, and they just continue that way, and you are good to go. And these are probably the people that are able to get pregnant right away. But again, I would probably bet these are the people who went on birth control for birth control, and they maybe didn't have any underlying issues. And so that's really the point I wanted to get across today. We've been 20 minutes. Holy, where does the time go? If you have questions, please comment on this video. If you joined late, you can watch this on my IGTV. Like I said, it's also live on YouTube, so it will save on my YouTube channel. These are the things we talk about in Her Time of the Month. These are the things I talk about with my patients that I work with individually and put through the period passport. We are talking about the impacts of birth control. We're talking about how to move forward from it. And we're trying to reduce symptoms, and we're trying to deal with symptom management through things like proper diet and liver support and sleep management and stress management and education. Because if you know, then you can make choices that are right for you. If we don't know, we can't change what we don't know, right? And so not understanding is not your fault. But having this information puts the power into your hands so you can decide what you want to do, because there are options. If you were just using birth control for contraception, there are options that don't involve hormones. They're more difficult. They need more work. But I mean, understanding your cycle is really, really important to your overall health. So hope everybody has a good Monday. Hopefully you learned something. Please comment below again if you have any questions, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks. All right.